ni sanciones, ni bloqueos, ni guerra psicológica, ni asedio. No hemos podido, no podrán, no hay, ni jamás, no hay forma de que le entren a Venezuela.
Breaking news from Latin America: Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has fired back at Donald Trump with a fiery warning. Your troops can't invade Venezuela. This comes as the United States dramatically steps up its military presence in the Caribbean, deploying 7 warships, a nuclear-powered submarine, and thousands of Marines to waters uncomfortably close to Venezuelan territory. Officially, Washington says the move is aimed at combating drug cartels, specifically the so-called Cartel de los Soles, a shadowy network accused of operating at the highest levels of the Venezuelan state. But for many analysts, the timing and the scale of this buildup raise far bigger questions. Is this really about narcotics trafficking, or is the United States preparing to challenge Maduro's grip on power directly? And with Caracas now on high alert, warning that no invasion will ever succeed, are we witnessing the first sparks of a dangerous confrontation in America's own backyard? Here's what's unfolding right now. Under direct orders from President Trump, the United States has launched one of the largest military deployments to the region in recent memory. The operation includes 7 heavily armed warships, a nuclear-powered submarine, and more than 4,500 U.S. personnel with over 2,000 Marines positioned for rapid response. American surveillance aircraft are already patrolling the skies while naval assets have begun monitoring maritime routes linked to Venezuela. The Pentagon insists this is about cracking down on drug trafficking networks that funnel narcotics into the United States. At the center of this campaign is the infamous Cartel de los Soles, a network allegedly tied to senior members of the Venezuelan military and political elite. U.S. officials describe it as one of the most powerful drug cartels in the hemisphere, moving tons of cocaine through Venezuela into Central America and beyond. But critics argue that the scale of this deployment goes far beyond a traditional anti-narcotics mission. With a nuclear submarine, amphibious assault ships, and thousands of Marines now stationed just outside Venezuela's doorstep, many are questioning whether Washington's real objective is something far larger than cartel interdiction. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has wasted no time in responding, delivering a fiery rebuke aimed directly at Washington. In a televised address, Maduro declared that there is, quote, no way they can enter Venezuela. He accused the United States of staging a dangerous provocation, designed not to fight drug traffickers, but to intimidate his government and rally support for regime change. According to Maduro, the U.S. military buildup is nothing more than propaganda wrapped in the language of anti-narcotics enforcement. Caracas has now taken its case to the United Nations, lodging a formal complaint against what it calls a violation of international norms. Venezuelan officials argue that Washington's actions are not only illegal, but also reckless, raising the risk of miscalculation in an already volatile region. Maduro, in his address, went further, accusing Trump of trying to manufacture a crisis as a distraction and warning that any attempt at military aggression would be met with what he described as unbreakable resistance. With those words, Maduro is not just rejecting the idea of U.S. intervention, he's attempting to rally both domestic supporters and international allies, painting Venezuela as the victim of imperial overreach. But Maduro's defiance hasn't stopped at speeches. On the ground, Venezuela is taking visible steps to prepare for a potential showdown. In recent days, Caracas has deployed its own naval vessels into nearby waters and activated military surveillance drones to monitor U.S. ship movements. The government has also launched a massive recruitment drive, calling on civilian militia, what it calls the Bolivarian People's Defense Units, to prepare to defend the homeland against what it describes as Yankee aggression. Reports from Venezuelan state media confirmed that more than 15,000 troops have been mobilized along strategic border regions, particularly near Colombia, where the Maduro government insists U.S.-backed narcotics gangs could attempt cross-border incursions. Venezuelan officials claim these measures are purely defensive, but they serve as a strong message that Caracas will not sit idle while U.S. forces mass offshore. At the same time, Maduro is leaning on his regional alliances, signaling that Venezuela is not isolated. He points to support from partners like Cuba and even potential backing from Russia and China as proof that any U.S. intervention could spiral into a broader confrontation. In short, Maduro is mobilizing not just soldiers and ships, but also political theater, trying to show both his people and the world that Venezuela is ready for a fight. While both sides flex their military muscles, analysts warn that what we're seeing may be less about drug cartels and more about political power. Officially, Washington insists this deployment is aimed squarely at narcotics networks, like the Cartel de los Soles. But critics point out that this is not the first time the United States has used anti-drug operations as a cover for wider strategic goals. They draw parallels to the 1989 invasion of Panama, where U.S. forces moved against dictator Manuel Noriega under the banner of counter-narcotics, only to topple his government entirely. Some advisors close to the Trump administration are already hinting at this dual purpose. One reportedly said, quote, "This is 105% about narcotics. But if Maduro winds up no longer in power, no one will be crying about it." That kind of statement fuels suspicions that what we're really witnessing is regime change posturing, with the U.S. military buildup serving both as pressure and as preparation for Venezuela. This is existential. Maduro's regime has survived sanctions, isolation, and political unrest at home. But a direct U.S. military challenge, even one framed as anti-cartel, could threaten the very survival of his government. So where does this all go from here? On one hand, the Pentagon insists this is a focused mission, a crackdown on drug cartels that just happens to take place near Venezuela. On the other, Maduro is framing it as nothing less than a prelude to invasion. That gap between US messaging and Venezuelan perception is exactly where miscalculation can occur, and miscalculation at this level could be catastrophic. If the U.S. deployment remains at the level of surveillance, interdiction, and maritime patrols, the situation may simmer without boiling over. But if Washington escalates with airstrikes, special operations, or even a targeted campaign against Maduro's inner circle, the confrontation could spiral quickly. Maduro, meanwhile, is signaling that he's ready to rally militia's call on foreign allies and use every ounce of propaganda to frame himself as a defender of national sovereignty. For now, the world is watching closely. Is this about drug cartels, or about toppling a regime that Washington has long wanted gone? Could this end with Maduro's fall, or with a dangerous clash between U.S. forces and Venezuelan defenses in America's own hemisphere? One thing is certain: the stakes have rarely been higher.